Hi BookTube, and welcome to a new video. This will be a tag which I happen to be recording on a Tuesday. Whether it gets uploaded on a Tuesday for Tuesday tag, we will have to wait and see. And this is the story idea writing tag which I caught today on Britta Bowler's channel, and I shall link to that in the description box. Britta had done it as a sort of a birthday tag, so happy birthday Britta. And now I did try and go to the tag originator video, but that doesn't seem to be available anymore, so I can't link to that. And this is a tag for booktubers who also write, of which I am one. So here we go. 1. Current story. What is the story you're currently working on? Well, there are two modes of work for a writer. One is writing the book, and the other is marketing it. And I have a new novel coming out next week, in fact. So I'm working on marketing for that, and I'll be publishing a video on BookTube just talking about that book. But if we're talking strictly about writing a story, which is implied by the tag, well, I've got a book that's pretty much complete, although as yet I haven't submitted it anywhere, called Stories We Tell Our Children. And it's 30 or 31 sort of quite short stories which are related by theme, and that theme is, if you think about the types of stories and fictions that we tell to our children, so it could be such thing like There's a Tooth Fairy, or Father Christmas, or fairy tales, or getting them to open their mouth to take food as here comes the train, or here comes the aeroplane, open wide, all that sort of stuff. Then I go on to more specific fictions, such as advertising or the boy band narrative, and all these sorts of things. And I just show how pernicious such stories are, and that maybe they're the wrong stories to equip the 21st century child with. That they actually do more damage than good. That's pretty much completed, and I'll be looking to do something with that when there's a break for the book that's coming out next week. Question 2. Spark of inspiration. Does your idea begin with characters, plot, world building, or something else? Well, it's quite hard for me to say. My early books all began the same way, which once I had the voice of the narrator and a central image, visual image or metaphor, that was the book. And then I would sort of sit for 6 months just letting it seething away in my subconscious, and I wouldn't start writing it or anything. I might make the odd note, but I really wouldn't approach it. And then after about 6 months I would sit down and I would blitz write the first draft because it was ready to come out. It almost came out fully formed. But I've moved away from that because I have got much more sort of episodic bite-sized chunks that form my narrative now, and I can write them very quickly and I can respond very quickly. So if I get the idea for a scene or an event, I can execute it quite quickly. Even though I have a job, I can find the time to do it. So now it can be any kind of prompt, really. An idea can come from anywhere. I mean, I've written a lot of flash fiction, which is stories of 1,000 words or less, and the prompts in them can come from anywhere. So I once got off the bus and I saw a woman's shoe was just on the grass verge, one shoe, and it was a flat sole, so it wasn't like you see them before where the heel snapped or the strap has snapped and they've been abandoned, possibly on a drunken night. But this wasn't. This seemed to be in working order. And that sparked a story in the time it took me to walk the 5 minutes from the bus stop to my home. I saw a guy on a tube train who was bald, but he had a couple of sort of scabs on his head. And for me, that just, I wonder, what's caused those? And I wrote a story based, on my imagining of how he got them. And it was from ECT, from the electrodes. And, so prompts can come from absolutely anywhere. But it's nearly always an image or a metaphor. Question 3, brainstorm. How do you puzzle piece your story elements together? Do you start with ending and make your way to the beginning, or vice versa? Well, I never really think about this. It just, as you go along, the novel sets you a set of challenges, sort of intellectually, artistically, and linguistically, and you just sort of, plough on through solving each one. I'm not a planner. I don't have sort of graphs of character development and post-it notes and a whole sort of flow charts of plots. I don't do that at all. I just as I say, normally I've been sitting on it for 6 months and it just comes out. And you know, in terms of sort of piecing together or making the joins, yes, sometimes there are in certain places, but I don't see them as particularly overly significant. I just bash on it. You know, it's part of the craft of writing, is to solve the problems that your own book throws up. Keep or toss. How do you know when you want to keep or dump any story idea? This is a really interesting question. So the recently late playwright Sam Shepard always said that he wrote the first 15 pages of any play, and then he would review it. And if he felt it was, you know, a good one, then he would go on and complete it. If he felt it didn't have legs, he'd ditch it. And I really admire that sort of discipline, to be able to sort of just say, no, this isn't going to work. And I'm not really like that. I never throw anything away. So, for example, I have a work in progress that sort of ran out of gas at 40,000 words. And I put it aside, and the next day I started something new. But I will go back one day to that 40,000 word thing. So, in answer to sort of dump a story idea, again, you know, the material leads you. So that, you know, I may have an idea for a story that I know hasn't got the legs for a full-length novel, but might have a good short story in it, or it might even only be a flash fiction of 1,000 words. So because I had that range of frameworks for my fiction, it's very rare that I really throw something away. 5, original idea. How much of your original idea actually ends up being used? Well, going back to my method where I've sat with something for 6 months in my sort of subconscious, and then I blitz it, write it out. Most of it, because as I say, for me it comes out almost fully formed. I'm not particularly plot driven. Character, I tend to think in terms of voice, and as I say, voice is the start of any novel. So a lot of those elements are in place. So what changes between the first and subsequent drafts are sort of fine tuning, really, and often word choice, sentence structure, rather than great, you know, plot or structural or whatever. It's pretty much all there in the first draft. 6, hide or share. Do you share your book ideas with friends or keep them secret? Well, it's not by choice, but I very rarely share them. I mean, I've never had a beta reader. Most of my friends in my social circle are not great readers, and if they are, they're not really reading the type of stuff I write. So it's just sort of worked out that way, that I don't share. It's not a sort of a superstition or an ideological thing. It's just how it's worked out. 7, dream. How many of your book ideas originate in dreams? Well, none. But having said that, I write I write a lot, be it parts of a novel or individual short stories and flash fiction, lying in bed trying to get to sleep. When, as I've explained this mechanism before, you know, because I'm not a professional writer in terms of I have to work for a living, I have enough material to be writing every day if I was in that position. So that, you know, I work, then I come home and I, you know, do the sort of chorey things like feed myself. I've had kids, you know, that I'm the main child rearer of. So up till recently I've been sort of involved with them. So when I go to bed, I probably haven't had a chance to do any writing. So I've gone to bed anticipating sleep, but being an insomniac, that very rarely happens. And what happens is, as the sort of affairs of the day fall away, as I'm lying there, the writing side, the creative side of my brain goes, okay, we now have an audience with you that, you know, you're now going to listen to us. You're going to listen to these ideas, and you know we're working now, even though I'm flat on my back. And I've adapted this mechanism whereby I sort of, you know, I don't get up and write it down at 2 o'clock in the morning because that would be lethal. But I've taught myself to remember keywords so that when I get up in the morning, that's when I write it. I remember the keyword and then I remember what it sparks, which can be chunks of dialogue. You know, I've written chunks of dialogue. So it's not a dream in the sense of that sort of level of consciousness where you are switched off and all these sort of fairly surreal elements are. But it is a pre-dream state of trying to get to sleep. So it's, you know, I can't give a scientific answer to that, but there seem to be levels of sleep, and I'm at the sort of superficial level, and I do create and I do write, and it's stuff that's welling up from the subconscious that hasn't had the oxygen during the day. 8, doppelganger. Have you ever had an idea for a story and then saw it in a movie? Well, not that way round, no. Although, no, there was one, which I now can't remember. But I have taken images from books and stuff and films and use them in stories of my own, not novels, I hasten to say. You know, flash fiction, because you've only got 1,000 words to play with, your palette is quite limited. So, for example, I remember in X-Men, one of the X-Men movies, there was a brilliant shot of one of the X-women who had sort of this sort of flame red hair, and she sort of cast and created fire everywhere. And there was a brilliant shot of the contrast of her flame red hair with the fire behind her. And I thought it was a stunning image. And I wrote a 1,000-word flash fiction story about a witch burning that goes badly wrong, based on that image. So, you know, I do take limited bits from other sources. 9. Big screen adaptation. Have any of your favourite movies or TV shows sparked ideas or scenes in your book? Well, apart from, as I say, in small bits in flash fiction, no, because movies are movies and TV shows are TV shows, and I don't see them as literary. I see them as filmic or televisual, and I don't think it's a very fertile cross pollination to go from one to the other, especially with novels, because they're interior. You know, they're only visualised inside the mind of the reader and the author, whereas a film is actually there in front of the audience, has been visualised. So I don't really like doing it. I will take little things from films and just write a very short story, almost a sketch, around it. But I won't do that for a full novel. And finally, 10, nostalgia. What is the oldest story you remember coming up with? Well, it wasn't a story. I mean, I used to write song lyrics, and that sort of branched into really bad teenage poetry. And I was very involved with the campaign for nuclear disarmament in the 80s. And I wrote a poem that was about nuclear destruction. And sort of the first stanza had 10 lines and the second had 9. So the poem was counting down to, you know, 0, you know, year 0, ground 0, mutually assured destruction. So I think it had a good structure, but I think the words are pretty rubbish. In terms of my prose, I really can't. Oh yes, I can. So when I had a year off between school and university, and I travelled for 2 months of it. But before that, for the other 9 months or so, I sat down to write the great British novel at age 18, which is a completely ludicrous idea that I'd have lived any kind of life to give me that. And it was about a guy in Manchester who was completely isolated and cut off. He was a Joy Division fan. With the suicide of the Joy Division singer Ian Curtis, he was completely adrift. And he had a girlfriend who was a nurse in the NHS, and even back then in the 80s, she was desperate to get out of it because how badly they were paid and treated by the bureaucracy. And they were the two characters, really, and it never saw the light of day. So there you have it. There's my story idea writing tag, and thanks to Britta for putting me onto it. I hope there was some stuff of interest about my writing process to you there. Please fire any. I'm always happy to talk about writing. I think my approach is quite idiosyncratic, so I'm not sure how universal what I offer is useful to other writers, but I'm very open to discussing it both with writers but also non-writers. If readers are interested in the writing process, I can talk a lot more about sort of writing with insomnia or through insomnia. I could talk a lot more about the actual use, my writing process of that first draft and the use of music in it. So please feel free to fire questions, and I'll happily answer them in the comments. Till next time, thanks very much.